Hello there and welcome back. This is now our fifth lesson and it's our penultimate one. We've got one more after this one in our series of lessons on the Broads National Park. As normal, we're going to start off by just recapping our memory, jogging our memory by going over our notes from last lesson. So again, if you could just open up your books or your folders or wherever you've kept your work from last lesson, have a quick flick through and remind yourselves about what we were doing. Probably the pictures on the screen will remind you. We were looking at stakeholders in the last lesson, and the first question that I'm going to ask you here to jog your memory is, what is the name of the organisation which looks after the Broads? I'll give you a clue. That chap in the top left hand side of the screen here is the man who is talking to us and representing the Broads in the video that we watched in the last lesson. Secondly, can you name two benefits of tourism for local people? And the local couple that we heard from in our stakeholders video last week were James and Charlotte. There they are at bottom left of the screen. And then we also heard from all of those people on the screen, but also Hannah, who was the lady that oversaw a farming business and lots of diversification ventures. She is the lady top left, but just next to Nick on the right hand side of him there on the screen. The question says, name three ways in which farmers could change their business to cater for tourists. So if you want to pause the screen now, grab a piece of blank or scrap paper, or maybe turn to the backs of your books, have an attempt at those three questions to jog your memory about what we did last lesson. All right, so in this lesson, we're going to be looking at this thing called fieldwork. So there's our title at the top of the screen. Again, if you can write that down into your books or onto your piece of paper that you're using, Fieldwork in the Broads is today's title. Underline that. And in this lesson, we're going to again look at three different key things. Firstly, we're going to try and consider the role of fieldwork to ask questions about the landscape around us. Now, some of you will have been on geography trips. Some of you may have been on humanities trips out and about, maybe in your local area or maybe further afield, but perhaps not all of you will have had the opportunity yet to have undertaken fieldwork. But fieldwork is an important skill in geography, and it's something which is required at GCSE level and at A level and even university level. And fieldwork is all about understanding the world around us by actually going out and investigating those places ourselves. So it's an important thing that we know about. Secondly, we're going to interpret and present real fieldwork data, which has been collected in the past from the Broads. And I'll tell you about that when we get to it, about the data that we've gathered. And finally, we are going to assess the limitations of the fieldwork methods that we use. That word limitations has come up a couple of times already. It's where we try to reflect upon how useful or how reliable or how accurate something is, and in this case today we're going to be reflecting on the quality of the fieldwork data that we have been using. So to start us off again just to kind of get us warmed up, a small little quick activity. I'd like you to find that piece of paper or that scrap piece of paper that you were writing on earlier, and I'm going to ask you here three short quick fire questions, and I'd like you to have somewhere to write those bits and bobs down. So I'm going to show you over the next three slides three different images that are all taken from the Broads. The images should prompt us to ask questions about why the landscape looks as it does in that photograph. So for instance, if you were to see this photograph that you've got on the screen here, some of you may well ask the question, why are there bricks? Or why there are pieces of wall on that beach? There also looks as if there's perhaps pieces or lumps of concrete on that beach. If you look at the cliff that is behind the back of that beach, you wouldn't expect that concrete and bricks would naturally appear in that cliff. So some of you may then ask the questions, where have these things come from? And that is one of the key skills of a geographer. A geographer, as they are moving their way through the landscape around them, should actually be asking questions, and asking questions about why the world looks as it does, and perhaps how it's been shaped, and why it now appears in the way that we can see it. So this first activity this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, or wherever it is that you're looking at this lesson, is going to encourage you to ask questions about a given landscape, a landscape which is given to you. Now, it's up to you whether you ask just one question or whether you actually want to ask 2 or 3 questions, but I'd like you all at a minimum for each picture to write down at least one question. Now, the only stipulation, the only thing that you have to do is that question has to start with one of those 4 words in the purple boxes at the top of the screen. So it has to either be a what question, a why, a where, or a how. So those 2 examples that we've got on the screen there would be ideal. Why are there bricks on this beach? And where have they come from? Okay, so get a pen ready, get your piece of paper ready, and when you are ready, let's move on. So here we are. This is an image that we've used a couple of times already in the lessons leading up to where we are today. And what I would like you to do is to look at that picture, and you don't have to look at the things on the beach. It could be anything else on that picture. It could be in the sky, it could be in the foreground, it could be in the sea. But I would like you to ask 1 or 2 questions for this picture 1. While you're doing that, you can press pause on the screen and start again when you're ready to move on to the next one. Okay, so here is picture 2. Bit more close-up action going on this one. And again, this is a good picture for us to ask questions about. If we look at what's happening and perhaps what's the expressions on people's faces, there is quite a few things that I think you could ask about this image here. So again, try to come up with at least 1 or 2 questions that begin with either what, why, where, or how. While you're doing that, press pause, and when you're ready to start again, press play. Okay, so here is our 3rd and final picture, and there's quite a bit going on in this one. I'd like you to take some time just to look at all the different elements of this picture. Think about what's happening in the background, in the distance, maybe on the left-hand side of the photo, and even perhaps here on the foreground as well. So again, same as before, I'd like you to ask at least 1 question starting with either what, why, where, or how. And while you're doing that, you can press pause, and when you're ready to start again, just tap the start button. Okay, so you should now have at least 3 questions that you've written down from those previous 3 images that we've seen. Now, the reason that we're doing this is that geographers, and all students really, but particularly in geography, our best geographers, those people who are best at this subject, are not just the people that are asking for the answers and saying, "Sir or Miss, can you tell me the answer to this?" But they're actually people who are what we call inquisitive. And when they look at the landscape around them, or when they look at people and the way that things look, or the way that results are shown, that they're actually asking questions about why the world operates as it does, or perhaps why the world looks as it does. Geography is the subject where we are really encouraged to ask questions and to try and find out the answers for ourselves. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at this thing called fieldwork. Now, fieldwork is a fantastic opportunity for us to ask questions, but also to find out the answers to those questions ourselves. And the very best bits of fieldwork are fieldwork investigations which are done where actually it's not really easy to guess what the answer is going to be until we've actually started digging around and measuring and asking questions. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, this idea of fieldwork in geography. So if you go back to your neat part of your work today, and underneath the title that you should have already written, this is just a quick definition that I would like you to add underneath your notes. So we're going to be looking at the role of fieldwork today, as I've said, and therefore it's important that we are clear and we understand what this word fieldwork means. So the definition that we are going to use today is this: fieldwork involves the collection of information from the world around us. It has the aim of helping answer the questions that we have about the landscape. So have a quick read through of that, and I would like you then to add that definition, or a simplified, slimmed down version of it, underneath the title that you've got today, so we're clear on what fieldwork is. While you're doing that, you can press pause and start again when you're ready. So you might spot that I'm wearing a t-shirt here with a logo. There's my logo of the Geography Fieldwork Academy, and there are some of my tutors that I work with in Southwold on the Suffolk coast. We've got Lauren there on the left, and then we've got Zoe and Hannah and Joe and Will on the right hand side. They're part of my team that work with me on the Suffolk coast and work with students to deliver and help them learn fieldwork skills as part of the courses that we deliver. So over the summer of 2020, obviously we had less schools working with us than normal because of the coronavirus pandemic. So the team were busy working on all sorts of different projects, and one of the things that I asked them to do was to complete some fieldwork in the Broads, and they did that and were able to gather lots of data and collectively gather lots of information and lots of results. They did that using something called the Jogit app, and the Jogit app is a fieldwork app that has got 35 different methods of fieldwork data collection on it, and you can use it on your phone, on an iPhone or an Android, and it automatically saves and collects the data that you are gathering, and then it just emails it to you later, and you can then use that data and present it in a number of different ways. So that is Jogit, the fieldwork app. So our team used this app when they went to the Broads, and they gathered a huge amount of information, which is now going to be our job to interpret. Okay, so this is the point where I'm just going to ask you to make sure that you have got a copy of the 3 different worksheets that support today's lesson. They all look the same in terms of the titles on those pages, and that will say at the top of them Fieldwork in the Broads, like this one on the screen does. And this is the first one that I would like us to look at. Over the course of the next few slides, we're going to work our way through these different activities, and I would like you to write your answers and your information onto these actual sheets. So each of these sheets refer to a different piece of fieldwork that our tutor team conducted. The first thing we do when we do any fieldwork is we set an aim, and the aim is where we try to kind of explain the point of what it is that we're doing. So this aim that we have on this first sheet here, if you can read it at the top there, says, what age group does the Broads currently appeal to most? So what we're saying here is that we're going to do some fieldwork to try and work out essentially who the Broads is most popular with. Who does it appeal to? So to do that, we're going to do something called an age survey. But the reason that we're asking this question in the first place, as you can see on the screen there and on your sheet, we have a little bit of a justification where it says, why are we asking this question? Well, traditionally, the Broads has long been associated with older people, perhaps because of its slower pace and its kind of relaxed and chilled out activities that you can do. So it generally is a place that is considered to be more popular with older people and perhaps even retired people as well. And many people would perhaps not assume that it's necessarily a place that attracts in a lot of younger people. And so we're going to do this age survey to try and find out whether that is actually the case and whether that's true. So we're going to complete something called an age survey. And you'll see that you have a box kind of about a third of the way down the page there that talks about the method of data collection. Underneath that, in the box, it says age survey. And then next to it, there's another section in that box that says methodology. So methodology is basically kind of a geography word for recipe. And what it means is the step-by-step instructions of how we completed that piece of data collection. So where we write a methodology, that's essentially where we're actually writing out how we did something with lots of detail in it. So in that first box there, it says that our tutors visited 5 different areas in the Broads on 3 separate days, including a bank holiday, a Saturday and a midweek day. On each of those occasions, we completed an age survey of 20 pedestrians at each site we visited. Therefore, we gathered 100 results each day, and in total 300 results. We combined our results from all 3 days together. We tried to discreetly estimate people's age within categories of 10-year groups as they walked past a chosen spot, rather than asking them directly, as we didn't consider that this was going to be fair or appropriate. And those, therefore, are the results that we gathered. So having observed in a range of different places across the Broads over 3 different days, 300 different people. These are the estimated age categories that those people fell into. And you can see that grid there of 2 different rows and several different columns are the results that we have. As you look through the grids there, you can see that every single age category has got at least somebody represented. The lowest number that you can probably see there is on the right hand side, which is representing people between the ages of 91 to 100. There were only 2 of those people that were spotted. We've presented that information then because it's not always easy to kind of interpret data when it's just in its kind of written format and in a grid like that. So the data has been presented in that graph that I don't know, it looks a little bit like a kind of a triangle in some or a pyramid, and that's what it is. It's a population pyramid. So these things are called population pyramids, and you can see that there are those horizontal bars, and the width of those bars represent how many people of each of those different age categories were recorded. So I'm going to give you a bit of time just to look at that and try and work out what that graph is showing without putting any words into your mouth and without giving any answers away. And you'll see that on this page here, there are 3 questions which are relating to that graph on the right-hand side. I would like you then to ask or answer those 3 questions and to write your answers into the spaces which are provided. When you have got yourself ready to start that, press pause and press play again when you're ready to resume. Okay, so the first question there was asking you which age group are the Broads most popular with. The second one, what did the results for the age groups between 0 to 30-year-olds suggest about the Broads currently? Well, it'd be interesting to see what you've said about that, but one of the things that you can see from that graph is that there are very few people, or there are significantly less people between the ages of 0 to 30 who are attracted to the Broads currently. And that suggests perhaps that the Broads at the moment doesn't naturally appeal to those people. Maybe those people don't think that there's enough for them to do in this area. Maybe it's not perhaps necessarily marketed well enough to these people. These people perhaps are more likely to be using their phone for advertising rather than things like newspapers or magazines. So perhaps the Broads needs to think about how they might reach these people between the ages of 0 to 30 to try and entice more of these people in. And that's something that we're going to be considering between now and the end of the lessons that we cover. The third question, based on the results here, should the Broads Authority consider ways to make the area more appealing to young people? So it's up to you. You can either choose yes or no for that, and your answer therefore will probably link to the second answer that you've given. So there we go. We've done our first piece of fieldwork interpretation. We've looked at an age survey, and based on the results of that age survey, we've now got a good idea about who is in the Broads and perhaps who the Broads Authority and local tourist ventures need to focus on to try and attract into this area. So that was a useful exercise for us to do in terms of working out who the Broads currently appeals to. If you have finished that activity and would like to stretch yourself a little bit further, one of the things that we can do is consider the limitations of the data that we have got here. So this question that has arrived on the screen here says, consider the limitations. Justify how reliable you think this method of data collection is. So for this, you're having to reflect on how good and how accurate, how valid you think the way in which we collected this data was. If you think back to how that data was collected, it was basically us making an estimate on people's ages. Now, where you're doing estimations or guesses, essentially, you're not going to be completely accurate, and therefore the reliability of that data may well be less strong. So that's the type of thing that we're suggesting that you think about here, but you might think there are also other limitations to this method. And again, if you're looking to really kind of stretch yourself, you might, underneath the answers that you've just put here, or maybe around the graph here, perhaps just do a little asterisk and add in a little note to suggest why you think the data that was gathered here was perhaps not completely reliable. Okay, so we've done one piece of data collection. Now we're now going to look at a second piece. The second aim that we're aiming to achieve is the question, which are the busiest locations within the Broads? Now, we've already looked in previous lessons at the boat census data, and we were able to work out which parts of the Broads on the water were busiest, but we haven't actually looked physically yet at the data gathered within the streets or the urban areas within the Broads. So for this question, we're wanting to find out which parts of the Broads are busiest. Again, underneath the aim on your sheet, you'll see there's a bit of a justification there. And it says there are particular parts of the Broads which are more developed. They've got more attractions and they've got more capacity to cope with higher numbers of people. However, there are areas that are less visited, less developed, and by completing a pedestrian survey across a huge range of these different locations within the Broads, it will be possible to establish which are the busiest places and which are the places which are least busy. So to do this, we're simply going to do a classic form of geography fieldwork, which is called a pedestrian count. And for this one, we visited 19 different locations within the Broads over a weekend. Each of those locations was near to the water, not literally right next to the water, but near to the water, and was a space open to the public, such as a park, a pavement, a high street, or just a riverside walkway. At each of those locations, we completed 3 separate counts, and they were all lasting 5 minutes. And they were all at 5-minute intervals. So we might have done one at 12 o'clock until 12:05, and then another one at 10 minutes past 12 until 15 minutes past 12, and then our third one at 12:20 until 12:25. Okay, so from that then, we have been able to work out which areas were the busiest. And we recorded the people that were walking past a given point and or running. We didn't record people that were cycling, we didn't record people that were on the water or that were in vehicles. So the results that we gathered are actually already presented for us on this map here, and you'll probably recognize the style of that. This is a GIS map, a map that has been created using ArcGIS. And again, I'm not going to give the game away by telling you what that map shows just yet, because I would like you to interpret the data. And again, there are 3 questions down the right-hand side of this page, which I'd like you to write the answers to. And while you're doing that, press pause and press play again when you're ready to resume. Okay, so to just go through those answers, the first question says which location had the highest number of pedestrians? So to find that out, we need to look for the biggest symbol or the biggest bubble. So have a look at that map there, and hopefully you've written down the name of the place which is underneath the biggest bubble there. Give some reasons as to why this location may have a higher number of pedestrians. So again, this is up to you. Think about why more people would perhaps be visiting that location than any other. Why might people go to that one specific location? And you perhaps won't necessarily know what the specific answer is, but just give some reasons as to why more people might be going to that one place rather than any of the others. And finally, is there a correlation between the number of pedestrians and the distance from a major road? So correlation is again another kind of a mathematical word, but we use it quite a lot in geography at GCSE, in particular A-level geography. Correlation is just a posh word for a link, basically. So is there a link between the number of pedestrians and the distance from a major road? So have a look at the map again, if you haven't already come up with that answer, and try to say either yes or no. I try not to say not sure. Okay, again, if you have finished that and found that quite straightforward, think about the limitations again. So this is something that we encourage students to do with all fieldwork, is to try and question the quality and the reliability of the data and the things that they are being provided with, or the things that they themselves have collected. This question here then is asking us, why may it be difficult to accurately compare pedestrian numbers between places? So think about the logistical, the kind of the practical difficulties about comparing pedestrian numbers in one place to another, and actually then also to 19 different places in total. Is it going to be possible, for instance, to do that at exactly the same time in all 19 locations? Bear in mind, only 5 of our tutors were doing this at the time, and they couldn't therefore be in 19 different places all at the same time. Think about any other practical things that may have made that data less accurate than it could ideally have been. Again, if you'd like to make some notes of those, you can write that perhaps somewhere where there's a bit of space on that sheet with a little bit of an asterisk to mark how you consider that there might be some limitations to this data. Thirdly and finally, this is the last piece of fieldwork that we are going to be reviewing, and this is a lovely thing called a choropleth map or a choropleth map. And we have the aim here of where have tourist visitors in the Broads travelled from. So it's quite useful for us to find out whether the Broads is a national park which appeals to just local people and people within this region of East Anglia, so places like Suffolk and areas beyond the national park in Norfolk and perhaps in Essex and Cambridgeshire as well, or does, like a number of the perhaps more famous national parks in the country, like the Lake District, does the Broads National Park have a wider appeal? Do people from all across the country come to visit the Broads National Park? So again, what we did here, in 19 different locations across the Broads, we surveyed 200 pedestrians at random. We asked them the question, do you live within the national park? If the answer was no, we then asked the second question, can you please tell me the county which you live in, or which you normally live in? We have then been able to gather those results from all of those 200 pedestrians, and we have presented it there in that chart on the right-hand side of the middle of the worksheet that you now have. So to present this data, we're going to present it in something called a choropleth map. And a choropleth map is a map which is shaded to represent different colours, or shaded different colours to represent different numbers. The first thing that's important to do with a choropleth map is to choose the scale and the colours that you're going to be using for your key. The scale has already been chosen for you, and you can see that you've got 5 different categories on that key, with 50 plus, 21 to 50, 11 to 20, 6 to 10, and 1 to 5. What I would like you to do is to use a pencil crayon, so a coloured pencil, and I would like you to shade that top box where it says 50 plus in the darkest possible shade using that coloured pencil. So if you've got a red, press quite hard and make that a nice deep dark red. Progressively then, I would like you to make that shade of the same colour lighter. So the box below it needs to also be red, but a little bit lighter, and then a little bit lighter further, and for the last 2 boxes, as light as possible. Make sure though that the 1 to 5 category is not just pure white, and there is some shading to it that represents a very light shade of red or whatever colour that you've chosen. Okay, it might be that you actually do a red, orange, yellow scale there, and you have a scale that goes from red to light red to orange to light orange and then to yellow. So once you've got your key complete, you can then work your way through the results in the grid on the right hand side of that sheet, and you can actually then start colouring in the counties of the map that you have got. So to start off with, the first result that we have is for Norfolk, and it says that 67 people that we surveyed in the Broads had come from the county of Norfolk. So you then need to find where Norfolk is on your map of England and Wales there, and once you've located it, you then need to colour in Norfolk in the same colour that is kind of relevant to it on your key. So Norfolk has got 67 people. So if you look at your key then, that would mean that that is in the 50 plus category. So whatever colour that is, whether it's that dark red or a dark blue, you need to colour Norfolk in that colour. And then hopefully it's fairly obvious how you then continue. Suffolk is the next one on a list. Suffolk has got 39 people, so that won't be coloured in the same colour that you've just done Norfolk, because it fits into the second category on our key. That fits into the category of 21 to 50. So for the shade that you have used in that section, you need to colour Suffolk in that shade or that colour. Okay, spend a little bit of time with your pencils going through those results and colouring in the choropleth map of England and Wales. And when you have finished that, press play again, and we will go through the questions that hopefully you will then also go on to answer on the bottom right hand side of that worksheet. Okay, so hopefully you have produced your map and you've got a nice pattern which has been displayed by it. And you've also then thought about interpreting the data by looking at the question on the bottom right-hand side of the sheet, which says, describe the pattern displayed by the results shown on your map. Is there a correlation between the number of tourists and the distance from the Broads? Well, to not give the game away, I would have thought that hopefully, if you have coloured in your map correctly, you will see that actually the closer to Norfolk we get and the closer to Suffolk we get, the higher the numbers and the darker the colour, suggesting that actually, yes, the Broads does appeal mostly to people in the local area. There are some people, aren't there, that are coming from further afield, but generally the pattern is that the closer people are to the Norfolk Broads or the Broads National Park, the more visitors there are from those regions. So this perhaps indicates to us that actually there may well be more that can be done to market and advertise the Broads to people nationally across the country to try and entice in more people from further afield to come to this area. Is there a correlation between the number of tourists and the distance from the Broads? Well, I would have thought that most of you are able to say yes to that question based on the results that you've just displayed. Okay, well done. You've done 3 different pieces of fieldwork there. And whilst interpreting that data, you've also become more familiar with questionnaires, age surveys, and pedestrian counts. Again, finally, just to finish this one off, because we've been encouraging you to think about the limitations of each of these methods, the question that we've got here is, how may these results be different if the data was gathered in the winter? So bearing in mind that the data that was collected by my tutors was collected during the summer holidays, would these results be different, therefore, perhaps if you were collecting this data maybe in the middle of January, for instance? So have a think about that. And again, if you think that that's one of the limitations, then you can make a note of that on your sheet. Okay, so you've now got 3 completed pieces of fieldwork data. You've seen how that data has been presented, but you have crucially interpreted that data, and you've been questioning the value, the reliability, the limitations of some of that fieldwork. To finish off then, this is what we do with fieldwork. We set out an aim initially, we then collect the data, present the data, and then interpret that data. But finally, the thing that we have to do is to try and draw conclusions from the fieldwork that we've done. So I would like you to complete what's called a key detail summary of the findings of your fieldwork in no more than 100 words. It doesn't have to be massive, and that's not 100 words for each of those different pieces. It's an overall summary statement which tells us what we've learned from those 3 bits of fieldwork that we've completed. Okay, so have an attempt at that. Again, press pause and then play again when you're ready to start. Okay, so hopefully you've been able to draw some conclusions about who it is that the Broads appeals to, about where the busiest parts of the Broads are, and also about where people travel from to get to the Broads. So we've been able to do that and crucially prove that with evidence, and evidence that has been gathered by real fieldwork. So in this lesson, we've done 3 different things. We've considered the role of fieldwork to ask questions about the landscape. We've interpreted, and we've also looked at presented data which has been gathered from the Broads. And then we've, again, with each of those things, assessed the limitations of the fieldwork methods that were chosen. So to finish off again, we have 3 different challenges. Challenge 1, name 3 types of data collection methods. Well, hopefully you can remember the 3 types that we've used today. Challenge 2, name 2 types of map which can be used to present fieldwork data. Okay. And challenge 3, give 3 likely limitations of completing fieldwork in the summer. So what perhaps are the issues, the problems potentially of completing fieldwork in the summer and trying to say that that fieldwork is completely reliable? Are there any problems with that? Again, you can pause me while you're attempting those and start again when you're ready. But that brings to an end this 5th lesson, and once again, well done today, and I'll see you back in the classroom for our final lesson, number 6, next time.